What's good? Welcome to Top Title Sports. I am Eric Vincent. Thank you for tuning in because I really need your help today, Lions fans. My state of worry with this team is at an all-time high. And I'm not trying to say, they're going to miss the playoffs or they're going to have some dramatic drop-off. It's nothing to that extent. But based on the excitement that we had and based on the path that we thought this Lions team was walking on, it feels like they just completely turned around and went the opposite direction. After this Thursday's game against the Green Bay Packers on Thanksgiving, I'm as worried about this team as I have been all season. Even after the Ravens game, I'm more worried now than I was then. The holes and the problems on this team look worse and worse by the week, especially going back to the last two. I remember going to the game with my friend against Chicago, thinking that they would be just fine. They would be able to put Justin Fields in the same blender that they did last season. And I was all the way wrong. He had his most comfortable-looking game up until the last couple drives. And then you would think Jordan Love, who's not a great quarterback, but not as mobile as Justin Fields, which seems to be the biggest kryptonite for the Detroit Lions, is mobile quarterbacks, you would think that they would be able to garner some pressure and make some defensive efforts that could put some pressure on Jordan Love throughout a injury-rattled offensive line and offensive unit, period, for the Green Bay Packers. And what actually happened? Jordan Love looked as comfortable as we've seen him look all season. I don't think he got sacked, actually. Didn't look like he got pressured all that much. He was as comfortable as you could imagine. And it wasn't up until the fourth quarter where he pulled off that, 40-yard run to seal off the clock and keep moving in the fourth quarter. They didn't get any kind of pressure on him, and they weren't using him in a super mobile manner either. It was just great game planning with their offensive line and an execution of plays, which is something that the Lions couldn't do consistently. And I'm sitting here looking at this team, knowing what their issues were to begin with, and how they've been exposed over the last couple weeks, really the last few, because they weren't great on defense either against the Chargers, as Herbert was clean all game. So this has been a problem really all season, and they look worse and worse and worse as the season goes on. So what's my grand feeling now about this team? They're not Super Bowl ready, and they had a chance to be that. They're a good team with an opportunity that they had to become great, and they passed on it for whatever reason. Whatever the reason is, it can't be justified to me at this point. Maybe you can't talk to me in the comments. I'd love to hear it because I'm very upset with this team as the days go by. As I think more and more about how they went through the draft and hearing Brad Holmes say, we don't follow anybody else's mock draft. We follow our own. Like, all right, that's cool, man, but what's the benefit in ignoring the biggest problem on your defensive unit, as well as the most valuable person on your defense thrives when he has help around him? We saw that at Michigan through his entire career. Now, he is good at beating one-on-ones, but that's the problem. He's not seeing one-on-ones. He's seeing two-on-ones. We just saw in film study on Twitter that the Lions were literally dealing with him getting chipped by 3 different players on the Packers. The tight end would chip Hutch, then the center would pull around and chip Hutch, and then A.J. Dillon would come chip him as well. It's absolutely ridiculous that that's the kind of attention a second-year player has to deal with when you had numerous opportunities to put some help around this kid and get some help in his direction. What did you do? You signed Bruce Irvin, who ain't been good since he was with the Seahawks. He's 36 years old, and that was the best help you chose to get for Aiden Hutchinson and this defensive line, who are getting exposed at this point through simplistic game plans. We all knew that they had talent in their secondary, and the linebackers were playing better. But as the season goes on, you need to be able to lean on the trenches to get ready for the playoffs. Now what are we seeing? Jerry Jacobs getting picked off. We're seeing Brian Branch get a lot of penalties and teams targeting him more than they did to start the season. Cam Sutton even had a rough time against Keenan Allen. No shame in that. He's one of the best receivers in the league. But still, they're targeting these players. They're making it a plan to go after your weaknesses. And that's the problem because you have a chance after chance after chance to fix these problems. And did you? No. You don't follow anybody's mock draft. Okay. But what did you do? You drafted players that are barely being utilized, and you went and gambled in positions where you had opportunity to get some high quality talent to address your defensive line. So you barely do that in the draft. Broderick Martin's barely played this season. Great. Let's go to free agency. What did you do there? Not much in terms of getting help for Aiden. There's nobody on there. You relied on what, year two Aiden to pop off. Then you relied on Aiden Hutchinson's basically corner mates in Kaminsky, Aleem McNeil, Charles Harris. You relied on all these guys that you brought back, Isaiah Buggs, all good players, but they're not game-breaking talent. They would all be better with somebody else next to them. And you didn't bring in anybody that made sense to make this defense that much better, to bring in any kind of depth. You could have brought in some late-round guys. You didn't even choose to do that. You completely ignored the defensive line. And then not only did you do that, you had one of your best pass rushers all last season right at your roster. You didn't have to re-sign him. You didn't have to re-sign James Houston. He was already on your roster. And instead of keeping him in the defensive line rotation, you're using him on special teams and dropping him back in coverage? What are we doing here? It's like they're going out of their way to push themselves out of their Super Bowl window. Because, again, you didn't do nothing in the draft. You didn't sign nobody in free agency. And you didn't make a deadline trade either. When you see good teams going after what? Defensive players. Defensive lineman players. That's not a coincidence. That's not a coincidence. All these good teams were making moves to get better, to prepare themselves to finish the season strong. And the Lions are looking like they might finish it pretty weak, especially against a weak schedule. You can't be going down. It's gotten to a point now where, let's say they won against Chicago and Green Bay. If they were to step into, let's say, the Saints, so that means they're coming off a 3-game win streak after the bye because they beat the Chargers, and let's say, hypothetically, they beat the Bears and the Packers. You can't expect them to run the table. So I would think then after winning 3 and you put yourself at a 9-2 place instead of 8-3, then maybe a game like the Saints isn't a must-win scenario because you're that much closer to 10. But now you put yourself behind the 8 ball, and you sit here with teams that are hungry because the Packers ain't out of it yet. I mean, granted, we don't have to see them again. You beat them the first game, but they're in a place where they can steal a wild card position. Minnesota's still winning somehow with Josh Dobbs. I can't figure it out, but they're still winning. This is not over yet, and they're putting themselves in positions where they're losing and playing bad to teams that they should be wiping the floor with. I'm not here to discount any of the victories that they've had. I'm not that kind of person. I don't believe in that. You play who's on your schedule. I don't care how good or bad the competition is. When you play bad competition, you wipe the floor with that competition, like you did with the Packers the first time, like what you did with the Falcons, like what you did with the Panthers. That's what you're supposed to do against bad teams. And they found ways to win against good teams, and then they barely skirted by in games, like what they did with the Bears. Wasn't proud of that game, but you live with it and you survive because previous Lions teams lose that game. But the problems with this team are really being exposed. And when you think about as they get closer to the postseason, and when you think about things like the Niners having 15 sacks in 3 games since Chase Young has been there, and what has the Lions defensive line been doing? Absolutely nothing. Can't even breathe on a quarterback. Just They literally had a chance to put themselves in that room with those elite NFC teams, and they just chose not to. The Eagles made a move. The Bills made a move. The Niners made 2 moves. The Seahawks, our kryptonite team, even made a move. And the Lions just said, good for them when they were asked about it. That's what Dan Campbell said. When they were asked about other teams who made their moves, all he said was good for them. We're happy with our guys. These guys have been there before. But you're not even using your talent how you should be. James Houston, and now he's hurt until December. And then when it's time to add players who are available and address your immediate needs, you choose not to. We just talked about this before. People say you don't always draft for need. Okay, but at the deadline, that's exactly what trades are for. That's exactly what free agency is for. And when you're a team with a Super Bowl window, where you're playing in a bad division, where you're playing in a leaky conference where basically everybody has a bad loss in it. Hell, even the Eagles lost to the Jets. So everybody's not perfect in that conference. But now, as these teams have gotten better and they're getting stronger and they're figuring out their problems heading into the postseason, yours are getting exposed. So let's say they do get to the playoffs and they do have to eventually see Philly or San Francisco, where you have to see Jalen Hurts, a mobile quarterback behind a well-oiled offensive machine with one of the best wide receivers in football, one of the best tandems in football, an angry DeAndre Swift, a top 5 offensive line, a deep defense with a defensive budding star in Jalen Carter, who you could have had and you chose not to go after him. It's just a lot of reminders of what they could have done to be stronger and more prepared for this moment. Yes, we're going to be happy if they win the division. We're going to be happy if they do get a playoff win. But when I'm sitting here thinking about it, there was a chance for you to really be more competitive than any other team in the NFC, and you chose not to capitalize on that. That's disappointing, man. It's really disappointing, especially considering these losses, or not these losses, but the loss and the performances that they've been piling up lately. They look terrible. They look terrible. It's Goff or whatever he's tweaking on. He can't stop turning the football over. He looked like he did when he was with the Rams before he was traded to Detroit. They got some problems, man. They got a lot of problems that need to get solved, and I don't think they're going to have time to do it. Again, I'll be happy if they do end up, winning the division and getting a playoff game, but I'm going to be remembering this too. I'm going to remember before the deadline when they said, we don't need to improve on anything. Hutchinson will be fine. No, Hutch needs help. These pieces around need help. The secondary needs help. This D-line with limited depth needs help. And you chose not to do anything. But tell me if I'm wrong. Talk to me in the comment section. I'd love to hear your feedback. How are you feeling about the Lions going forward? Do you believe that they're a Super Bowl ready team? I don't believe so. I think they've been showing us the past couple weeks, but I'd love to hear from you. Talk to me in the comments. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Shout out to everybody who's been locking in as we just went over 100 subscribers. Tried to hit that goal before 2023 ended, and we were able to make it happen. Appreciate your support. Thank you all for tuning in and rocking with me. I'll see you again soon on the next video. Thank you for tuning in. I am Eric Vincent. This is Top Title Sports. Peace.